Problem? Any problem?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll discuss about pulmonary tuberculosis. Pulmonary tuberculosis is an infectious disease caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Okay, it is an infectious disease and it is a communicable disease. Okay, spreads from person to person. So this is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Is a unique bacterium. Okay, it's a unique properties are there. It is a communicable disease and spreads from person to person through aerosols or droplet particles. When a person with active tuberculosis, remember this word, active tuberculosis. So there are two terminology which need to be differentiated. TB infection is different, TB disease is different. So active tuberculosis is TB disease where there is sputum positivity. Okay, so a person with sputum positivity and a person with sputum positivity is known as active case, active tuberculosis case. So this person who is having pulmonary tuberculosis, okay, pulmonary tuberculosis disease, who is having sputum positivity, whenever this person coughs, sneezes or spits, there is a chance of spreading this disease to others. So this is a communicable disease. When asymptomatic, it is known as latent tuberculosis infection. Okay, when asymptomatic, it is known as latent tuberculosis infection, whereas 10% of the cases progress to active disease. Remember this, all those who are infected need not develop the disease. Okay, all persons who have acquired the infection need not develop the disease. So only 10% of those who have infected will progress to the active disease. Okay, rest 90% will be having latent tuberculosis infection without any disease manifestations. What are the risk factors for development of active disease? Okay, so active disease, development of progression of the infection to disease. What are the risk factors? Immunodeficiency states, overcrowding and malnutrition, smoking, alcoholism, illicit drug abuse, diabetes mellitus, chronic lung diseases, particularly silicosis, chronic kidney disease, immunosuppressant. So all those people with these underlying conditions, okay, have increased risk of developing active disease. What is the pathogenesis? What exactly happens? About 90% of those infected with TB are asymptomatic and known to have latent tuberculosis infection. Only around 10% cases progress to overt active disease in lifetime. So lifetime risk is 10%. Whereas in HIV patients, the risk of progression to active disease is 10% per year. Okay, it is not lifetime; it is 10% per year in case of HIV positive patients. TB infection begins when the TB bacilli reach the alveoli, where they invade and replicate in the alveolar macrophages. Okay, as I told in my previous classes, first cellular line of defense in lungs is alveolar macrophages. So these alveolar macrophages will be monitoring the lungs. Okay, what their function is to know which is coming from outside into the lungs. So whichever is, if they recognize the particles as external agents, they will be phagocytosing. Okay, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Because there is power interruption here, that's why I'm asking. But the alveolar macrophages recognize TB bacilli as foreign body and try to kill them by phagocytosis. In this process, the macrophages engulf the bacteria, try to kill them in phagolysosomes using reactive oxygen species. But because of the presence of thick waxy mycolic acid wall, so this is a unique bacterium. Unlike other bacteria, this has got unique properties. So it has got thick waxy mycolic acid wall which helps in evading the cellular defense mechanism. So because of the presence of thick waxy mycolic acid wall, the tuberculous bacilli evade the phagocytosis and replicate within the cell. The primary site of infection in the lungs is known as Ghun focus, which is located either in the upper part of lower lobe or lower part of the upper lobe. Okay, the primary site of infection is the Ghun focus. TB of the lungs may also result from hematogenous dissemination, wherein the apex of the lungs is involved and is known as Simon focus. Okay, it can be directly from the external. Okay, from the inhaled particles, aerosols or droplets which are coming into the lungs, then it leads to Ghun focus. Sometimes it can, after entering the lungs, it may spread through hematogenous spread to other part of the lung. That is mainly, most commonly, apex of the lung will be affected, and this is known as Simon focus. With hematogenous dissemination, any part of the body can be involved, like peripheral lymph nodes, bone, brain, kidneys. For unknown reasons, heart, skeletal muscles, pancreas, thyroid are rarely affected. Okay, so it can affect any part of the body. For there are exceptions. Okay, nail and hair are not affected, and for unknown reasons, heart, skeletal muscles, pancreas, thyroid, and they are rarely affected. Okay. TB is classified as a granulomatous infection wherein there is aggregation of macrophages, T lymphocytes, B lymphocyte, and fibroblasts. So it is a granulomatous infection. You can see this granuloma on histopathological specimen of the involved organ, whether it is lung, whether it is lymph node. If you take the biopsy specimen of the lung or biopsy specimen of the lymph node, if you examine under microscope with specific stains, okay, you can see the granulomas. Okay, you can see the granulomas. When the infected macrophage is attacked by other alveolar macrophages, they fuse to form a multinucleated giant cell in the alveoli. So once after entering into the lungs, there will be first one macrophage will be trying to kill the TB bacilli, but because of the defense mechanism, that is waxy mycolic acid wall, thick wall, so the macrophage will not be able to kill the organism, and this organism will be replicating within the macrophage. Okay, and after this there will be surrounding macrophages will also come to the area of infection. Okay, the focus of infection, and try to kill the organism. So in this process they will be fusing to form a multinucleated giant cell in the alveoli. The granuloma may prevent further dissemination. This is known as granuloma. Okay, the multinucleated giant cell along with other some T lymphocytes, okay, some B lymphocytes, okay, some fibroblasts. These all put together, this is known as granuloma. Okay, this is known as granuloma. This granuloma may prevent further dissemination of TB bacilli and provides an environment for the interaction of immune cells. So this is a defense. This is also a defense mechanism from the our body. That is host defense mechanism. What is this? Granuloma formation. So by forming a granuloma, the further spread of the TB bacilli will be prevented. Okay, and this provides an environment for the interaction of immune cells with the organism. The TB bacilli use this granuloma to avoid further immune response. So in one way it is a defense for host and defense for the TB bacilli also. So this TB bacilli will be using this granuloma to avoid further immune response. Macrophages and dendritic cells in the granuloma are unable to present antigens to the regional lymph node, thus the immune response is suppressed. So usually what happens is the organisms will be killed, and all the organism antigen product, okay, protein products of the organism will be represented by macrophages and dendritic cells, which are known as antigen presenting cells. So these antigen presenting cells like macrophages and dendritic cells, normally they take the antigenic molecules to the nearby lymph nodes. But in this tuberculosis, so there will be suppressed immune response. Okay, the antigen presenting cells are not efficiently able to present the antigens to regional lymph nodes, thus the immune response is suppressed. Bacteria in the granuloma may become dormant, resulting in latent TB infection, or may replicate, causing active disease. So there are two ways: either the bacilli become dormant, okay, they become dormant, or that leads to latent tuberculosis infection, or they may replicate, causing to active, they are leading to active disease. An important feature of granuloma is the development of abnormal cell death, that is necrosis, at the center of the tubercle, giving to the naked eye the appearance of soft white cheese, which is known as caseous necrosis. So this is typically seen in tuberculosis. Okay, caseating granulomas. Okay, caseating granulomas are typical feature of tuberculosis. Okay, so caseous necrosis is the term given to this kind of necrosis. Gain of access to the bloodstream leads to dissemination of the TB bacilli involving multiple organs and causing miliary tuberculosis. In this process, okay, there will be central necrosis, and slowly there may be gain of access of the by the bacilli, TB organisms into the nearby blood vessels. Okay, nearby blood vessels through bloodstream, that can lead to dissemination of the tuberculosis involving many organs. Okay, that leads to miliary tuberculosis. This miliary tuberculosis is a mainly used. It is a terminology, radiological terminology. Okay, so miliary TB is used to describe the miliary nodules on chest X-ray or CT scan. Okay, so this is miliary tuberculosis is a part of disseminated tuberculosis. Classification of pulmonary tuberculosis: primary pulmonary tuberculosis, progressive primary tuberculosis, post-primary pulmonary tuberculosis. So coming to primary pulmonary tuberculosis, this is the initial infection with gonorrhea and primary complex, asymptomatic or non-specific symptoms, heals by calcification. So this may not be having a clinical features, or maybe mild symptoms which are non-specific symptoms. Okay, non-specific symptoms like low-grade fever, okay, chills, and short duration symptom will be there. And sometimes, most of the time, it goes unnoticed. Okay, primary pulmonary tuberculosis is the initial infection with gonfocus and primary complex. Asymptomatic or non-specific symptoms heals by calcification. Progressive primary tuberculosis, progression of primary tuberculosis, which represents less than 1% of the cases, usually in few months with seroconversion. That is, the person becomes tuberculin skin test positive. Okay, so this progression of primary TB usually it takes few weeks. Okay, few weeks to few months. Usually in few months with seroconversion. So examples for this progressive primary tuberculosis is TB meningitis and miliary tuberculosis. This is most commonly seen in children. Okay, post-primary pulmonary tuberculosis. This is the most commonly seen tuberculosis in routine clinical practice. Reactivation of latent TB infection or reinfection usually in adults with previous exposure. So this is the tuberculosis which commonly seen in routine clinical practice. Reactivation of latent TB infection. Remember that I told you in the beginning, 10% of the latent tuberculosis infection people will progress to active disease. So it can be reactivation of already existing TB infection in the body or reinfection by reinfection from some other person. Okay, reinfection getting from some other active tuberculosis patient in an adult who was previously exposed to TB basically. So it can be either of these two. Okay, so this is post primary pulmonary tuberculosis. What are the clinical features? So I will be discussing mainly about post primary pulmonary tuberculosis. Because primary tuberculosis, okay, primary tuberculosis patient will be having less symptoms, okay, which are non-specific. Okay, low grade fever will be there of short duration. So progressive post primary pulmonary tuberculosis is the most important thing which we see commonly in routine practice. Cough with or without expectoration, fever with chills particularly at night time, loss of appetite, loss of weight, hemoptysis, and night sweats. So these are all the clinical features with which the adult patient with post-primary pulmonary tuberculosis will present to you. Cough with or without expectoration, fever with chills, particularly at night time, loss of appetite, loss of weight, hemoptysis, night sweat. So any clinical features, particularly cough and fever of more than 2 weeks duration. Okay, there is a tuberculosis control program. I will explain the next slide. So in that there is an algorithm where cough or fever more than 2 weeks duration, first thing you should suspect is tuberculosis, pulmonary tuberculosis. What is how will you diagnose a patient of pulmonary tuberculosis? My discussion is about post-primary pulmonary tuberculosis. Okay, post-primary pulmonary tuberculosis. So diagnosis. So a person with clinical symptoms. Okay, person with clinical symptoms suggestive of tuberculosis. That is fever, cough more than 2 weeks duration. Then you should consider pulmonary tuberculosis as the first possible diagnosis. Then pulmonary TB is suspected in the presence of the above mentioned symptoms lasting more than 2 weeks. Sputum for AFB staining and AFB culture. So this AFB culture is the gold standard. Okay, AFB culture is the gold standard, but unfortunately it takes usually 2 to 8 weeks time will be there. Okay, so to obtain the result usually it takes 2 to 8 weeks time. So most cost effective method is AFB staining. Most cost effective method is AFB staining. Okay, within you can obtain the result within minutes. Okay, within minutes or within 1 hour you can get the report at the on the site. Okay, so and it does not, AFB staining does not need very robust lab. Okay, so basic. Okay, then sputum for AFB staining and AFB culture, sputum for CBNAT. CBNAT is cartridge based nucleic acid amplification test. It is a PCR based technique. Okay, it is a PCR based technique and it is available in government sector also, free of cost, done free of cost. The advantage with CBNAT is, even small paucibacilli, that is small numbers of TB bacilli can also be identified on CBNAT technique. That is one advantage. Okay, so even if you usually AB staining needs large number of bacilli to be present in in the sample. Okay, in order to be positive, whereas CBNAT small, not very low number of TB bacilli can be identified, and also at the same time you can identify whether the TB organism is sensitive or resistant to rifampicin, which is most important treatment drug used in the treatment. Okay, one is sensitivity is high, CB-NAT sensitivity is high, and second is whether rifampicin sensitive or rifampicin resistant, you can identify in the test sample. Chest radiograph, because of its availability everywhere, you can do. Even though this is an additional, okay, it is not the first line diagnostic method, but you can take help of chest radiograph whenever sputum AFB staining is not available. So this is primary complex. You can see primary complex here. Okay, so there is subpleural focus, gone focus with right paratracheal lymph node enlargements. Okay, okay, there are hilar and paratracheal lymph node enlargement, which is known as primary complex. Right hilar lymphadenopathy, you can see on right side, you can see right hilar lymphadenopathy here. Right upper lobe cavity. So remember this. The previous two, this one and this one, usually seen in primary pulmonary tuberculosis. Okay, primary pulmonary tuberculosis patient will be, if the patients are asymptomatic, even if they are having symptoms, they may have non-specific symptoms. And if you take X-ray in such a patient, you can see this kind of picture, either lymph node enlargement or small focus like this. Okay, here you can see. Whereas in post-primary pulmonary tuberculosis, that is usually seen in adults. Okay, usually seen in adults. Post-primary pulmonary tuberculosis, cavitation is the typical feature on radiography. Okay, cavitation, you can see in this picture, there is right upper lobe cavity, air containing space with clear-cut walls. Okay, cavity wall you can see clearly. So this upper lobe cavity is most common radiological presentation in post-primary pulmonary tuberculosis. So here also you can see right upper lobe cavities, multiple cavities are there on right side. Diagnosis of latent tuberculosis infection. Tuberculin skin test and interferon gamma release assay are two techniques available for the diagnosis of latent TB infection. Tuberculin skin test and interferon gamma release assay, limited value in developing countries where the prevalence of TB is high. So this tuberculin skin test and interferon gamma release assay are not routinely employed in our country because of the high TB burden in our country. Whereas in Western countries where TB burden is low, they can utilize this for diagnosis of active disease itself. Okay, helpful in low prevalence countries for screening purposes. National TB elimination program. So there is a government, this is undertaken by government. So government, there are so many government undertaken programs which particularly concerned with diseases of public health importance. Okay, diseases of public health importance like malaria, leprosy, blindness, and in similar way, there is a program undertaken by government for TB control. So this was there since 1962. Initially, it was named as National TB Control Program (NTP), National TB Control Program, which was in existence since 1962. Then later in 1997, this was changed to Revised National TB Control Program (RNTCP), Revised National TB Control Program, wherein there will be free diagnosis and diagnostic method. Okay, diagnosis and treatment are offered free of cost to each and every person. Diagnosis and treatment are offered free of cost to all the patients. Okay, all the patients. So this is Revised National Tuberculosis Control Program. So which is compared to the previous National TB Control Program, this is very well organized. Now recently in 2020, the naming is changed. Okay, name of the program is changed to National TB Elimination Program. National TB Elimination Program, where the target is by 2025 TB should be eliminated from the community. What is the treatment? Treatment of pulmonary tuberculosis, minimum of 6 months therapy with first-line anti-TB drugs in new cases as well as previously rated. So there is a change here. Okay, in previously we used to have category 1, category 2, category 3 like that, and patients in category 1, patients with new cases without any prior history of treatment were considered under category 1. Category 2, there were relapse, default cases like that. Okay, so now because of with the advent of CB-NAT technique, okay, with the advent of CB-NAT technique, because of the non-availability of CB-NAT technique, the method was different. Now after the introduction of CBNAT, there is, we can know whether the patient is sensitive to rifampicin or not at the immediately. Okay, usually within 2 days we get the report. Okay, whether patient is rifampicin sensitive or rifampicin resistant. So this is a breakthrough in TB treatment, okay, TB diagnostics rather, okay, in diagnosis. So because of after this introduction of CBNAT, there is a change in the policy, that is treatment policy. So minimum of 6 months therapy with first line anti-TB drugs, okay, that is isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide, and ethambutol, first line anti-TB drugs in new cases as well as previously treated cases. And 2 months of, in this 6 months therapy, there is 2 months of intensive phase, that is rifampicin plus isoniazid plus pyrazinamide plus ethambutol. 4 months of continuation phase, that is rifampicin plus isoniazid plus ethambutol. So in previous program policy, there was intermittent therapy, alternate days patient were given treatment. Okay, now it has changed to daily regimen. Daily regimen, fixed dose combinations are there. Okay, there is weight bandage, particular weight you will give 1 or 2 tablets like this. Okay, so this is the HRZD in daily regimen. Dosage is like this: 5 isoniazid is 5 mg per kg body weight, rifampicin is 10 mg per kg body weight, pyrazinamide is 25 mg per kg body weight per day, ethambutol 15 mg per kg per day. So this is the daily regimen dosages. Okay, daily regimen dosages. So based on this, you can put treatment whether one tablet. There is fixed dose combination. Okay, all the 4 drugs will be in one tablet. Okay, so based on the weight, there is whether to give 1 tablet, 2 tablets, 3 tablets. That will be depending on the weight bandage. Okay, so that is the thing. All cases should be evaluated for rifampicin resistance by CBNAT, Universal Drug Susceptibility. This is known as Universal DST, Universal Drug Susceptibility Testing. In olden days, okay, before the introduction of CBNAT, so what they used to do, they were mainly relying on culture methods. Okay, they were mainly relying on culture methods. Okay, based on culture, they used to test the sensitivity of various drugs. So because of that, there was a time gap of almost months together. Okay, so usually patient was started in a person who is presenting to you with new first time. So patient was started on 4 drugs. Okay, so after 2 months of therapy, again sputum was repeated. If sputum is positive, then again 1 month extended treatment. After that also, if sputum is positive, then we used to consider it as MDR TB. Okay, multi-drug resistant TB. Okay, what is this multi-drug resistant TB? Resistance of TB bacilli to at least rifampicin and isoniazid with or without other first-line drugs. This is known as multi-drug resistant TB. So in olden days, okay, before the introduction of CBNAT in government programs, we used to rely mainly on culture methods and culture sensitivity. Okay, culture-based sensitivity methods to know whether it is MDR TB or not. So after the introduction of CBNAT, you can know in all patient, okay, whether it is new case or which is a repeated previously treated, whether it is new or previously treated case, you will be offering CBNAT test for the patient. Okay, for the patient you will offer CBNAT test so that you can know whether it is rifampicin sensitive or not. Okay, if it is rifampicin sensitive, straightforward patient will be considered as MDR TB. Remember this rifampicin resistance is a surrogate marker for multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. Rifampicin resistance is considered as a surrogate marker for multi-drug resistant tuberculosis because almost 92% of the patient with rifampicin resistance are having multi-drug resistance. So whether it is rifampicin resistant or multi-drug resistant, treatment regimen will be same. Okay, so this is a breakthrough in RNTCP program. That is introduction of CBNAT, universal drug susceptibility testing will be done. So in the beginning itself, any person who is where you are suspecting pulmonary tuberculosis or for that matter any other extra pulmonary tuberculosis also. So the sample will be test for CBNAT testing to know whether TB is there or not, diagnosis of TB as well as rifampicin sensitive or rifampicin resistant. And remember that this program mainly concentrates on pulmonary tuberculosis because this is the infective form. Okay, this is a public health importance is because of the infective form of pulmonary tuberculosis. Right. So rifampicin resistant, even though you give treatment as well as diagnosis to other extrapulmonary tuberculosis also, the main concentration will be on pulmonary tuberculosis, which is the infective form. Right. So all the cases should be evaluated for rifampicin resistance, whether it is a new case or previously treated case by CBNAT. So this is known as universal drug susceptibility testing. Rifampicin resistance is considered as a surrogate for MDR TB. Multi-drug resistant TB, that is resistance of TB bacilli to at least rifampicin plus isoniazid with or without other first-line drugs, is considered as multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. So what are the complications of pulmonary tuberculosis? So what happens even after treatment? Even after treatment, patient may develop while being on treatment or before taking treatment or after taking treatment also. Some complications may develop as a consequence of pulmonary tuberculosis. Bronchiectasis sicca. Bronchiectasis sicca, also known as dry bronchiectasis. So presence of bronchiectasis without productive cough. Okay, presence of bronchiectasis, particularly due to the location of the bronchiectasis in the upper lobes. I told you, post-primary pulmonary tuberculosis most commonly affects the upper lobes. Most commonly affects the upper lobes, or okay, upper lobes. So presence of bronchiectasis is also more common in upper lobes in tuberculosis due to the location of the bronchiectasis in upper lobes, wherein secretions do not pull up due to cavities. Okay, so there is no secretion pulling up because it is location is in the upper lobe. So because of the gravity, whatever secretions are there, they will come out easily. So there is no pulling up of secretions. Because of this, patient, even though patient is having bronchiectasis, will not have much productive cough. Okay, remember this. Usually, normally in bronchiectasis, you get large quantities of expectoration, right? So normally in bronchiectasis, other than bronchiectasis sicca, because of the pulling up of secretions, you get large quantities of expectoration. Whereas in case of bronchiectasis sicca, also known as dry bronchiectasis, secondary to pulmonary tuberculosis, you get very minimal expectoration. This is seen in tuberculosis, which most commonly involves upper lobes, presents with hemoptysis. So most common presentation in bronchiectasis sicca is usually hemoptysis. Bronchostenosis, it is the focal narrowing of airway secondary to scarring by inflammation. Okay, bronchostenosis, see, in tuberculosis can affect any part of the lung. Okay, any part of the lung can be affected by tuberculosis. Sometimes it may cause endobronchial tuberculosis, or only predominant part involved is bronchus. Okay, endobronchial tuberculosis is known as endobronchial tuberculosis. Because of this endobronchial tuberculosis, there will be scarring, that is fibrosis, some fibrosis, and that leads to narrowing of the bronchus. This is known as bronchostenosis. This most commonly seen as a complication of endobronchial tuberculosis. Most of the time clinically silent. Symptoms depend upon the location and extent of stenosis. Now, most of the time it is asymptomatic. When symptomatic, patient may present with shortness of breath, recurrent cough due to post-obstructive pneumonitis, hemoptysis due to local tissue destruction, with bronchiectasis. On auscultation, patient may have localized wheeze. This is very important. Whenever you are examining the patient, not only in tuberculosis, in routine respiratory system examination, whenever you are finding wheeze, which is localized in particular part of the lung, then you should consider this bronchostenosis. Chest radiography is not useful in the diagnosis of bronchostenosis. Diagnosis of this bronchostenosis is confirmed either by bronchoscopy or CT chest. Okay, so either by bronchoscopy or CT scan of the chest, you can confirm whether there is bronchostenosis or not. Treatment options for this bronchostenosis include balloon dilatation, stent placement, cryosurgery, electrocautery, India laser therapy surgery. So there are various options. Okay, various options, right from minimal low grade intervention, that is balloon dilatation. Balloon dilatation, just to try to dilate the area where it is narrowed with various sittings. Okay, it is not in single sitting. Usually, depending upon the severity of narrowing, you can try with conservative method, right? Balloon dilatation. Okay, balloon dilatation. You can try repeated balloon dilatation, may help in some patient. Then, if it is not responding to balloon dilatation, then you can go for stent placement, cryosurgery, electrocautery, and other laser therapy methods, and surgery. Surgery is the last option where there is removal of the part. Okay. Destroyed lung is one of the complications in tuberculosis. Destroyed lung refers to the large destruction of lung secondary to pulmonary tuberculosis or any other infectious disease. Okay, it was an important sequel of pulmonary tuberculosis, particularly in pre-antibiotic era. Now, remember this: in olden days, we used to get almost total fibrothorax. One side of lung is totally destroyed because of tuberculosis. That was before the introduction of this anti-TB therapy. Okay, after the introduction of anti-TB therapy, we are getting less number of destroyed lung cases. So it was an important sequel of pulmonary tuberculosis prior to antibiotic introduction. Patients may be asymptomatic or may present with progressive dyspnea, recurrent cough due to infection and hemoptysis. Remember this, even though the total lung is destroyed, okay, patient may be asymptomatic, fight for some time, okay. So as the age progresses, okay, as some secondary infection appears, then patient will be diagnosed as destroyed lung, okay. Patient may not be aware of the underlying condition for some time. Recurrent infections are responsible for progressive deterioration of the condition, ultimately leading to respiratory insufficiency. Mainstay of therapy is pneumonectomy. So all the destroyed lung should be removed. Okay, if it is total lung, you can mainly it is pneumonectomy. Okay, removal of the lung. Bronchial artery embolization is a less invasive technique for recurrent hemoptysis. In a patient who is having all these above complication where there is recurrent hemoptysis, okay, a patient who is having hemoptysis are the presenting complaint in all the above mentioned complications. You can go for bronchial artery embolization that I will discuss later. Coming to hemoptysis. So remember this, hemoptysis is one of the complication of pulmonary tuberculosis. So what is hemoptysis? Expectoration of blood or blood stained sputum. So causes of hemoptysis: pulmonary tuberculosis, bronchiectasis, acute bronchitis, bronchogenic carcinoma, pneumonia. These are all the general causes of hemoptysis. In pulmonary tuberculosis, if you go further, okay, a person who is having active pulmonary tuberculosis may present with hemoptysis after being treated also. Okay, after being treated also, patient was treated with anti-TB therapy and he was cured. He was declared as cured. Patient is cured of pulmonary tuberculosis. Even then, he may present with hemoptysis at some point of time in future. So, what are the causes of hemoptysis in a person who was treated previously for pulmonary tuberculosis? One is recurrent infections. Okay, recurrent infection in the area where the lung is damaged. Second is uh, bronchiectasis. Okay, bronchiectasis, as I told you previously, bronchiectasis sicca. Okay, bronchiectasis is sicca or simple other bronchiectasis secondary to pulmonary tuberculosis. Patient can present with hemoptysis. Aspergilloma, that is fungal ball. Okay, fungal ball in a cavity. Okay, fungal ball in aspergilloma. Rasmussen's aneurysm, pulmonary artery dilatation, which is pulmonary artery aneurysm, which is traversing the cavity wall. Okay, so these are all the, and scar carcinoma. Any scar in the lung can lead to scar carcinoma because of whether it is because of tuberculosis or because of some other condition. Because pulmonary tuberculosis is the most common cause of fibrosis in our country. So scar carcinoma can develop in a person who was treated previously for tuberculosis and cured. Okay, so these are all the possibilities. So you should keep this in mind whenever you are coming across a patient who is presenting with hemoptysis and who was previously treated for pulmonary tuberculosis. These are all the possibilities. Management of hemoptysis, depending upon the amount of hemoptysis and the hemodynamic status of the patient, various modalities of treatment are available. Okay, so whether patient is stable, when patient is stable, you are not having large amounts of hemoptysis and hemodynamically stable. Okay, so just observation, conservative measures will be sufficient. Okay, conservative management with absolute bed rest and treatment of the underlying condition will be sufficient in case of mild cases. Massive hemoptysis, that is volume of hemoptysis is life threatening, that is causing airway closure, 100 ml to 1000 ml. Even though it is the amount of fluid is not important, amount of blood is not important, it is the presentation which is more important. Okay, if it is life threatening, whether it is 100 ml or whether it is 1000 ml, that is if it is causing airway closure, okay, the patient should be treated aggressively. Bronchial artery embolization. It is considered as the first line therapy in massive hemoptysis. Bronchial artery embolization is considered as the first line therapy in massive hemoptysis. This is because actively bleeding patients with poor underlying pulmonary reserve tend to be poor surgical candidates. Even though surgery offered at a later stage. Okay, surgery offered at a later stage when patient is hemodynamically stable. So immediate first line therapy is bronchial artery embolization. Because of the risk of death from asphyxiation rather than hemodynamic instability, more than 300 ml of output of blood is considered to be an indication for urgent intubation. So more than 300 ml of blood, hemoptysis, urgent intervention is required. In this procedure, that is bronchial artery embolization, aorta is catheterized through femoral approach. That is, aorta is catheterized through femoral artery, and selective bronchial arteriography is performed. Okay, so this they send a specific radio opaque dye, okay, radio opaque material into the bronchial artery. Okay, and they will be taking the examine under CT scan. So demonstration of extravasation of blood, tortuosity of vessels, aneurysmal dilatation, or increased vascularity is done prior to embolization. So they will be identifying the area based on these findings. Okay, if the radio opaque dye, if it is going out of the blood vessel, on they will be observing on CT scan. Okay, this radio opaque dye, if it is going out of blood, that is known as extravasation of blood. Tortuosity of vessels, if it is there, so they consider that as the blood vessel which is causing hemoptysis. Aneurysmal dilatation of vessel or increased vascularity, then you demonstrate these things prior to embolization. They identify the area, the vessel which is to be embolized based on these findings. Most commonly used embolic material is polyvinyl alcohol particles of 300 to 400 micrometer size or gel foam. Okay, so these are the material which is used for embolization. Okay, they will be sending this polyvinyl alcohol particles or gel foam into the area where there is tortuosity or extravasation of blood on CT scan. Okay, on CT scan. In the presence of larger arteriovenous shunt, stainless steel or platinum coils are also used to close the source of bleeding. Transient chest pain is most common complication. Non-target embolization of the anterior spinal artery is the most dreaded complication. So these are the complication. Okay, complication of the bronchial artery embolization procedure. Transient chest pain is most common complication because of the some non-target blood vessels will also be closed. Okay, in that process that can cause transient chest pain. That is not a bothersome thing, but non-target embolization of the anterior spinal arteries that can lead to paraplegia. Okay, that is the most dreaded complication. Okay, thank you. Any doubts?
No, sir.
So this is the last class for you. And if you have any previous classes to be repeated, or if you want any specific topics to be taken again, please let me know by this Sunday. Okay, so that we can repeat. We can take another 2 to 3 classes if you want. Okay. Thank you.